Hey, Dr. Simon, it's so good to have you on the podcast today, and I'm so excited to welcome you to Education Unlocked. My name is Sheree.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Sheree, first and foremost, and to have this time with you. I always enjoy having great conversations with people, right, to talk about the work and what we do. Well, I'm Erin Simon. I've been in education for about 25 years. I'm still super excited about my work. Started out as a teacher, right, in the Los Angeles Unified School District at Crenshaw High School, where I enjoyed my time there. Also served as a basketball coach there and also a dean. And for me, from there, I knew I had a true connection with education, and there were ways that I wanted to elevate the impact and my work in education as well. And from there, that's where I knew I wanted to be a superintendent. And I'm just truly thankful for those who helped nurture me to get me to my next steps in regards to being an assistant principal. In another school district and moving into a principalship and then a director, right, in the Long Beach Unified School District as director of student support services. And I did that for a few years and then received the amazing opportunity to be appointed as the assistant of school support services, right, in Long Beach. From there, I worked at the county office, the Los Angeles County office as an associate superintendent. And now I am the proud superintendent of the Bellflower Unified School District. And this is my 8th month on the job, first year in. And again, I'm still coming with the same joy. Um, and super excited about the work ahead. Super proud. It's just truly a pleasure to be here. I worked hard to get to this space. So I'm truly grateful.
It's amazing. And I want to go back a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about how you got into education. And I know you mentioned you started as a teacher, but talk to me a little bit about what got you into teaching, into education in the first place. Was there something or someone that inspired you? And I'd love to hear more about that journey.
Well, what I would say is I come from humble beginnings. Growing up in South Central Los Angeles, I was inspired, right, by a courageous and resilient single mother who is still my rock to this day, who pursued her education. So I always say, although she was an amazing single mother, she always wants me to remind folks that she is also highly educated. So a highly educated single mother who pursued her education, along with amazing grandparents, my maternal grandparents, who journeyed from the Jim Crow South, Mississippi to California in search of better opportunities, not just for them, but also for their children, my mother, my uncle, and my aunt. They wanted them to have amazing educational opportunities to unlock the door, right, to their potential, right? They felt they had great potential. And they do. They've gone on to do amazing things. But from there, I learned that education is the key to a limitless future. And I know that many sacrifices were made for me to be where I am today. And there was always this thought, as I tell people, my mother and I lived with my grandparents for a period of time. She was rebuilding her life after um, a very stringent divorce, very hard divorce. But living with my grandparents for 4 to 5 years, I still remember my grandfather and my grandmother waking me up every morning before I got dressed for school, and they would say, "Erin, are you going to be excellent today?" And the excellent wasn't just about me going to school and getting good grades. I know that now, and learning to the best of my ability. It was also in the way that I carried myself, the way that I carried the family name, and the way that I showed respect, right, to right my elders and also to my teachers. And that's something that carries with me right today. From there, I know that I come from family who also taught at local high schools in the area, whether it was around career or money aspects. My grandparents were pillars in the community. My grandfather was a deacon who was very close to the pastor, who was very involved in church. And from there, I learned, how to give back to the community and how to pay it forward. So when it came to actually teaching, my main goal, honestly, was to work in the music industry and to work in public relations. Music is my first love. Yes, I played basketball, but music is my first love. And I actually had an internship, right, in the music industry, and had a great conversation with my boss at the time who said, "Look, Erin, this is not for you. I know your family. I know your upbringing. I want you to see what's around you. I feel like you have a different calling from your life." From there, I worked in public relations. To give you a quick story, enjoyed it. But I got the call from a childhood friend that changed the trajectory of my career. And that call was, "Hey, Erin, Crenshaw High School is looking for a girls basketball coach. The coach wants to meet you. Are you interested?" And I was even thought. Then I asked, the next question was, "What do I need to do?" "Well, you have to take the CBAS because you also have to be a teacher." And I thought about it for literally a few hours that he said, and just a conversation that just enlightened or ignited the spirit within me. And I knew that was the next natural step for me to do. I was already involved in the community, working with young people, with young scholars. And to me, it was the next step. And so from there, 2 months later, I was teaching at Crenshaw High School. And that's how I got started in the educational industry, if you will, and have never regretted it, never tried to sway from it. It's been a true joy of my life, giving back to others, but also making impact and working with our amazing scholars and teachers.
That's amazing, and I love that journey. I actually did not know that about you, that you were, started off with music and PR and then kinda went into that transition there, so that's amazing to hear. And now transitioning into your current role at Bellflower, talk to me a little bit about how have these first 8 months, been? What has it been like? How is the community? How's the culture? And what are you excited about?
I'm excited just about right now listening and learning. And knowing the needs of our community and what that brings. What I tell folks, even before I became the superintendent for this amazing district, even while researching and preparing for my interview, I saw that this district had many amazing attributes and programs available for students that I felt that the broader community or even the community within the district did not know about. And that was aviation, like some amazing culinary programs. One of our high schools still has auto shop, which is not prevalent or known to be even in this area or in many school districts right in California. And so what I tell folks when I go out and speak and have conversations, whether it's with the Chamber of Commerce, right, our Rotary, or many others, just parents that I see in malls or in spaces, is that this district stands on the brink of greatness. And I see this district in my vision is where every student is known, every voice is valued, I mean, every school is ready to thrive. And people have heard me say that over and over. But what I'm truly excited about is just the work ahead, knowing the pieces that we have, knowing the conversations that we're having with community, that we're co-creating, we're co-partnering, the conversations that we're having with students, and seeing our students shine and see their brilliance. I had the pleasure, just quickly, to speak to the brilliance of being with one of our students this past Sunday as he was honored by the Museum of African American Art, the Anthony Anderson Foundation, just as a legacy maker. And more to understand and know that our student at Bellflower High School, who was one of 13 out of 1,300 nominations,
Wow.
making impact now, knowing that we have students at many of our high schools who are already out there contributing to society by having, like, whether it's sessions at the La Brea Tar Pits, putting on programming, co-hosting, speaking spoken word, just many aspects of the amazement of our students, right? Not waiting, right, till they get to be our age, but who are out there making the impact now on behalf of their community and behalf of whether it's their race, culture, and ethnicities. And I'm super excited about that and knowing that we have change makers, that we have legacy makers in our district. I'm also excited to know that our community wants to see many aspects of change. They are hungry for that. They're excited about our graduation rate, which is about 94%, uh, but also understands our challenges in some ways that we need to change our aspects, especially from the lens of equity, ensuring that all of our students have access to the best courses so they can compete, right? If it's not for college, but for careers. And so, how are we preparing our students in this way? And so, I'm excited about our movement. I'm excited about our trajectory. I'm excited that one of our schools just received Schools to Watch, right? The first prestigious distinction that this district has ever received. And so when I say that this district is on the brink of greatness, it's on the precipice of greatness, I say that for a reason because of the ways and the actions that we're taking and the things that are already happening within our community. And for me, that's exciting. And the future is bright. The future is bright for Bellflower. The future is bright for our scholars. And I always say this, none of this would be possible without the partnership, without the confidence, without the encouragement of our Board of Education, who also understands this and wants to elevate this district, not just to a state prominent district, but also to a nationally recognized district as well.
I love that. And I think that really kind of captures like the impact that you've also made just during your time here. So another question I also have for you is when talking about equity, right? What does that actually look like day to day in your division at the district?
I think it's rooting equity into the culture, right? Not just the calendar. So, in some spaces, equity becomes like, let's do a committee, let's roll out a PD. But I'm a true believer that deep equity work asks the hard questions like who benefits, who is left behind, where's the data pointing us, and what are we willing to do about it? And so in this district, there's a true belief, and it's part of my core beliefs as well, that you just can't name disparities, right? You must name your role in fixing them. So in Bellflower, we're building this into policies. What does that look like? So whether it's leadership pathways, whether that's instructional plans and so on and so forth, it's truly making sure that equity is everyone's job. And that's why we don't have district of equity position because
I
it's everyone's job, right, to be equitable or have an equitable mindset in the ways that they are creating and preparing these programs, right, for students. So I think that's important. And that's why for us, just quickly, we are changing how we enroll students into classes. We're building pathways to build futures for students, elevating advanced programs for students. And with that, it takes courage, right? Because you always have the resistance from others. But I always tell folks, we're not just looking at equitable outcomes for our most marginalized students, right? That's important. And that might be priority. But it's also looking at how we can raise, right, the levels of many of our highest performing students and how we're still preparing them, right, to compete in this very competitive society as well. And so that's what we're doing in Bellflower, and that's our belief.
I love that. And I'm thinking also going back, right? I know we kind of talked a little bit about your journey, getting into education, but I'm also curious, like, were there any experiences that you had, whether it was when you were first starting off or even just in previous districts that you've seen that have changed how you lead as a leader today and as a superintendent today? Are there some examples that you can share with us?
I think ways that I learned that proximity or being proximate is valuable, important, significant, and needed. And so I learned even as a principal, as I had students who were not attending school, right, for so many reasons and circumstances, right, being proximate, actually going to the homes, canvassing the communities, having conversations with parents, understanding what those circumstances were so that I could make the best educated, informed decisions, right, to work with that family, right, to help the student, the scholar. So for me, it's learning that, learning how our students lived, learning aspects of students who may have experienced some type of homelessness, being without food, right? Insecurity. But I tell administrators, you can't just lead, right, and make those decisions just in your office without being educated and informed. And that's why being proximate it's very important. You have to canvas. You have to go out and have conversations. And yes, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. And it takes a lot of work to build those relationships. But once you build those relationships, and that's what I learned, especially as being a continuation high school principal, building those relationships with students. Students do not want to disappoint people that they truly care about. And they know those people care about them. And I learned that even from, my time as a youngster, knowing who I trusted, my core energizing of family circle and then also community circle. So knowing just how students react, the trust, the time that it takes to build trust doesn't happen quick and fast. However, once you become that person who was proximate and that person understands that you care, it's easy to build relationships and for cities to trust you and for things to change in that way as well. So that's what I learned, even as a principal, building up to this point that you have to be proximate.
I'm sure it even applied even when you were doing coaching, right, as a basketball coach, because you were really building that family almost which is your team, right? You guys were traveling to competitions and doing so much together. So I feel like that applies in so many different areas too. And I guess another question I also just kind of think about is, what has actually I know people always talk about chronic absenteeism, they talk about attendance rates. And I'm just also curious on what has actually moved the needle on attendance in your
And Tree, I mean, we can't keep blaming students for not showing up
yes.
when the system doesn't invite them to. I've seen students, right, sleep in cars, experience homelessness, but still show up to class every single day. I've seen families navigate impossible schedules, transportation deserts, and trauma. And then, have systems who may send robocalls, right, asking students why they're asking. So for me, it's always being transformative. And that means going from punitive to compassionate. So I'll tell you this, in my time in Long Beach, whether it's Laco and now in Bellflower, the question that I'm asking staff, it's a very urgent and pressing question. How can we build schools students don't want to miss?
Mm.
Spaces where our students feel safe, reflective of their identities, heard and engaged. And I recognize, especially when you come into new spaces, that that journey requires time. Yet it is vital and immediate, right? And the call to action must happen urgently without delay. And the truth is, right? Attendance improves when students belong. So when someone greets them by name, when their voice shapes the classroom, when the curriculum sees them. But there's no quick fix, but there's a clear path, and it all starts with relationships. So we are heavy right now in capturing kids' hearts. You can see our teachers, they're greeting students as they come in. Some teachers have their own creative fist bumps, right, in
Okay.
ways that they greet their students and the ways that their students respond when they walk into the classroom. From just saying, tell me something good. Tell me something good that's happening, right? That's going on. Even from social contracts, right, that are happening in the classroom. How are students going to behave and not just respect themselves, but others, right, including that teacher in the classroom, right, during that time. But again, it goes back to even some of your previous questions, right? The proximity, being proximate, building relational capacity is very important, especially when you're trying to break down the barriers to chronic absenteeism. You have to show families that you care. I mean, you have to learn and be educated around their circumstances so that you can provide the right resources to assist that family, which allows that student, right, to come in as well. But students, once they have right this relational capacity with one caring adult at their school, they're not going to want to miss school, right? No matter what their circumstance may be.
I love and I think it's also just even about, like, how much they feel like, "Hey, I wanna be here, I enjoy it," which is exactly what you're saying. If they love something, they're gonna keep coming back to it, right? And they're excited by
Yes,
that. And so I'm even
absolutely.
thinking about, like, you started across so many different districts, you've had so many different experiences. Do you have any advice or perspective for also incoming superintendents or leaders, just even in the space, right? Who are joining into new districts, finding new cultural fits, finding new places to belong. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you've navigated some of those transitions between these different districts and schools and, navigating different communities and getting to know them? Talk to me a little bit more about advice that you would just give in general, because I think you have a lot to share that people would really learn from.
I think for me, it's simple: listen, learn, eat. Don't make heavy decisions. Initially, you need to understand the culture of your community. You need to get to know the key stakeholders, the players within your community, the desires of the community by listening to myriad of stakeholders, including like parents, staff members, your students, your
Hmm.
community at large, right? There are ways to do that, whether you have town halls or, you just invite people to lunch or whatever ways you may, invite or have conversations, right, with people. But you have to take your time, right? You have to move slow to move fast. And that's something that I learned from a previous superintendent, Mr. Chris Steinhauser, who was the former superintendent of the Long Beach Unified School District. And I remember he used to tell me, even when I first started on the job as director of student support services, first of all, you're here to work. We work here in Long Beach. I need you to work, right? There's some work for you to do, and move slow to move fast. Get to know your community, get to know the key players, and that's how you move right your system along. So I would say that for sure. Just take your time. I would say for those who are aspiring superintendents to land in that spot, I would also say this. Uh, I think many times that you're preparing for the superintendency, one believes they truly know what that seat means and what's entailed with that seat. And, I was naive once, and that was me as well. But I can tell you, until you sit in the seat, you don't know what the seat entails. So keep that in mind. And with that, listen and have conversations with current superintendents just so they can give you the landscape of what they're dealing with, how they successfully deal with their board, the conversation that they have with their community, and recognize that every situation, right, every superintendency is different. They're all uniquely different. There's not a one size fit all, but understanding how to navigate and build capacity and build relationships with people, that is essential. And I think also you must lead with love and compassion, and you must be your authentic self. So if you don't love scholars, if you don't love students, if you don't love people, I don't know if this is the job right for you. If you don't like challenges, I don't
Yes.
know if this is the job for you. If you don't like working with bosses, this is not the job for you because you have 5 bosses who, you work with and adhere to. So these are just things that I think most people don't truly understand, when they come into the seat. But it's really important for people to listen, be informed, be your authentic self, lead with love and compassion, lead with heart, and you'll move the needle right much faster than maybe you ever anticipated to do, even before you said it.
And I think that kind of also touches upon like how your entire leadership philosophy kind of goes, right? Like throughout every single district, throughout every single element that you've been part of, I can tell that's something that carries you forward too, which is awesome. And one thing that I'm curious too is like, let's just say you had to go back to your previous, self 20 years ago, and you had to give yourself advice. Like, hey, if I could go back, and I could share this piece of advice, or maybe to your son and your daughter, you could share some advice. What would that be? Like now looking at like everything you've achieved and you've done, is there one or two things or a few things that stand out to you that you would go back and tell yourself?
I would say, don't underestimate. This is what I even tell kids now. Like, don't underestimate the power of using your voice, even when it shakes. So,
Yes.
although I've always been this confident person, and maybe that's more of my sports background, like being confident, feeling powerful in a way that, hey, I feel like I'm the best on the court, and I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to show you. It speaks to even that. It's being confident. I've sat in rooms where I was the only one naming hard truths, and how lonely, right, that felt. But I also feel like silence never changed systems. Staying rooted in the why, I would remind myself to keep moving in that direction. Surrounding myself with co-conspirators, right? Not doing things in silos, right? Trying to change the world just by myself or even aspects within education, right? Having allyship, having mentorship, having sponsorship, also having those co-conspirators, right? As Bettina Love says so eloquently and lovely, and taking care of my own heart, right, along the way. And to continue to be my authentic self. I think when I was younger, there were points to where, hey, I felt I needed to code switch and not be myself, not show people that, yes, I am that girl from South Central Los Angeles who worked her way to the top through hard work, through grit, through determination, through prayer of a faith based person, and through the understanding that, yes, you do need help along the way. You need support along the way. And so I would tell myself, my younger self 20 years ago, just all those pieces don't change. I tell folks now, especially Black women, be yourself, be your authentic self. Women of color, be yourself, be your authentic self. Don't code switch for nothing. If you can't be your authentic self in an organization, then the organization is not for you. And so I'm grateful to the Bellflower Unified School District for allowing me to be myself and many other organizations that I've been with through my professional organizations and things of that nature. Be your authentic self and show up just that way. Leadership is about being you. It's about showing courage, humility, and the capacity to learn.
I love that. I want to end with a question that it kind of reflects back to your students a little bit because the question is, what does your success like? What do you think success looks like for students 10 years from now? So, like, let's just say that, your students today, they're going to go into college, go into the workforce. What do you think success looks like for them, right? I know it's going to be different for every single student, but we're in such a changing world at this point right now, and everything is like moving so fast and things are happening so much. I'm curious to see what your perspective is on that too.
I would say just being successful, whether that's in college or career, and able to build their own futures, able to be like global citizens, whether to be informed citizens, those who are able to give back to community, those who just continue to learn, those who lead with compassion and heart and being their authentic self, right? There are just many aspects of that. But having a system that really provides our students with the tools, our scholars with the tools, right, to be successful, for them to be innovative, for them to be creative in their own right and find their ways in many aspects of the world, whether that's fighting for equal rights, whether that's being a CEO in the music industry and allowing others, right, to share their music, right, finding spaces, right, for those who sometimes don't get the chances to be successful. It's also allowing others, right, to be successful as well after you find your success. And so that's something, even for me, that's hugely important as we're going to begin to build, right, more of those pipelines and support systems for our community conversations that I'm having with key stakeholders. How do we build it forward? How do we build pipelines for students to learn about what they're interested in, right, to give them the tools to move forward? And that's what I hope for our students. They have the tools, right, to be successful. And then once they find that success, they're able to come back and give back to help someone else be successful. It's fine, yes.
And that's amazing to see. I mean, you can definitely tell that by a lot of the students and some of the stories you even shared today about how awesome they are and what they're aspiring and what they're doing currently, even just in high school. So I want to just thank you for your time to share your story, your background, and the work you're doing, which is amazing. So thank you, Dr. Simon, for being on the podcast today
Thank you. I
and
appreciate you.
sharing some amazing insight.